Hello and welcome to Chapter 9 of the OpenStax Lifespan Development Textbook. Today we're going over physical and cognitive development in adolescence, ages 12 to 18. All of the following information is directly from OpenStax free resources on the subject of lifespan development and their free resources online. Thank you to OpenStax for providing this for students. Let's begin. Figure 9.1. Adolescence is a time of significant change in both the body and the mind. Let's go over a quick chapter outline. Section 9.1, Physical Growth and Development in Adolescence. 9.2, Puberty, Sexual Behavior, and Sexual Health in Adolescence. 9.3, Cognition in Adolescence. And 9.4, Decision-Making and Risky Behaviors in Adolescence. Section 9.1, Physical Growth and Development in Adolescence. What this section covers is identifying the milestones of physical development in adolescence, describing the major aspects of brain development in adolescence, and explaining the general health care needs of these adolescents. Figure 9.2. The limbic system regulates emotions and other behaviors. It includes parts of the cerebral cortex located near the center of the brain, including the hippocampus, as well as the thalamus, hypothalamus, and amygdala. When looking at the image above, we can see the hypothalamus. Think of the hypothalamus as the homeostatic process of the nervous system. Hypo equals homeo, making sure we are regulated. When it comes to the amygdala, this is involved in emotion processing, especially the fear response. And then the hippocampus is involved in memories. As you can see, the amygdala and hippocampus are close together, and there's a neuroscientific purpose for this. If you remember back to your childhood and as well as adolescence, if you're wondering why you can remember aspects of your life a little bit easier than others, it's likely, and if I were to ask you to try and remember one or maybe a few events or memories from childhood or adolescence, it's likely that you'd pick one that has a high emotional response. Now, when it comes to the amygdala and the hippocampus, amygdala being the emotion process of the brain and the hippocampus being memory formation, whenever you have an event in your life that has that high emotional response, it's like your amygdala and the hippocampus put a bookmark on that moment and on that day. Whenever you remember back to a certain event in your life, it's a lot easier to remember thanks to the emotions in that moment comparatively to a random Tuesday in your adolescence or childhood. Figure 9.3. Though the numbers are often quite similar, the nutritional needs of adolescents vary between sexes and at different age range. Notice the increased calorie need over the adolescent development stage and the lowered suggested calcium once adolescents reach age 19 years. Table 9.1. Common symptoms and health consequences of eating disorders. We're going to look at the symptoms as well as the health consequences. Firstly, we have restricted eating, and then the health consequence is anemia and blood pressure problems, intense fear of weight gain, muscle loss and weakness, distorted body image, brittle hair and nails, excessive thoughts related to body size, problems with the skin, including dry skin, underweight, which can include fatigue, unusual eating patterns such as over or under eating, binge eating, or fasting. This can influence gastrointestinal problems, including damage to organs, ulcers, constipation, reflux, and diarrhea. Forced vomiting, use of laxatives or diuretics, or other purging behaviors. Consequence can include throat, neck, and jaw problems, especially in cases of forced vomiting. Excessive exercise, dehydration, and electrolyte imbalance. A lack of exercise can influence organ failure and damage to heart functioning. Sudden or dramatic weight change can influence brain damage. Section 9.2, Puberty, Sexual Behavior, and Sexual Health in Adolescence. This section explains the changes involved in puberty and the ranges of pubertal timing, describe current statistics on adolescent sexual behavior, describe factors related to early sexual intercourse and associated health risks, including unplanned pregnancy and STIs, and identify the various types of sex education and the ways they impact sexual health and behaviors. Figure 9.4. On average, the onset of puberty begins earlier for females than it does for males. The duration of puberty is roughly similar for males and females, typically lasting around 4 to 5 years. Figure 9.5. Glands and hormones are responsible for initiating and regulating pubertal development in males and females, and there are key similarities and differences between the sexes. We're going to look at the gland and hormone, and then the difference between the sex male and female. The gland we're going to start with is the pineal gland, which is involved in melatonin. For females, regulation of circadian rhythm and onset of fertility. For males, regulation of circadian rhythm and timing of puberty. Next gland is the pituitary gland. Hormones include ADH, FSH/LH, the growth hormone, oxytocin, and prolactin. For females, osmoregulation, menstrual cycle, cell growth and division, labor contractions, and milk production. For male, osmoregulation, cell growth and division. The thyroid releases thyroxine. The thyroid releases thyroxine. For females and males, it influences the metabolism. Next is the adrenal gland, which is involved in adrenaline and cortisol. And for both male and female, this is involved in the fight or flight response and stress regulation. Pancreas, this releases insulin and glucagon. For male and female, this regulates blood sugar. Specifically for females, ovaries is involved in estrogen and progesterone. It influences menstrual cycle as well as secondary sexual characteristics. And then specifically for males, the testes is involved in testosterone and secondary sexual characteristics. Figure 9.6. The hypothalamus triggers the pituitary gland to release hormones that stimulate the testes in males and the ovaries in females, leading to physical and sexual changes associated with puberty. When looking at the image to the left, we have the top image pointing to the hypothalamus, which is involved in homeostatic processes and regulation, and the pituitary gland. Then when looking at the image below, the hypothalamus releases GnRH, and GnRH stimulates the anterior pituitary to release FSH and LH. So FSH release is involved in the female ovaries, estrogen, and the male testes for testosterone. Then when you look at the number 2 in the same image, FSH and LH cause body changes in primary sexual characteristics, the ovaries, uterus, testes, and penis. The secondary sexual characteristics, breast development for females, underarm and pubic hair, and then facial hair and deepening voice for males. Table 9.2. Common outcomes of early onset and late onset pubertal timing, adolescent females and males. For females, the adolescent health outcomes for early onset include more socio-emotional symptoms, including depression and anxiety, more risk-taking behavior, being a victim of bullying/teasing, higher BMI, and higher self-reported good health in young adulthood. Now, for late onset, less antisocial behaviors, lower risk-taking behaviors, less physical activity, lower BMI, and more depressive symptoms. For males with early onset, these outcomes include more antisocial behavior, more risk-taking behavior, less sleep hours, higher BMI, lower screen time in young adulthood. For late onset, more depressive symptoms, less antisocial behaviors, less physical activity, lower BMI, and more sleep hours. Figure 9.7. There was a decrease in various types of sexual-related behaviors reported by high school students over the past decade. You can look at the figure to the left and pause the video where you can look at the percentage of high school students who were ever tested for HIV, used a condom, or are currently sexually active, have 4 or more lifetime partners, and look at the difference in the years overall. Figure 9.8. Birth rates for females ages 15 to 19 by race and Hispanic origin of mother from 1990 to 2020. The U.S. teen birth rate has been declining since 1991 and reached a record low in 2020. The downward trend is evident across all ethno-racial groups. Cognition or thinking in adolescence. This section describes the formal operational stage of cognitive development in adolescence. Describe the information processing perspective on cognitive development in adolescence. Explain influences that promote or inhibit cognitive development. Now, in Figure 9.9, the pendulum task is used to identify a formal operational thinker who is able to think logically even when dealing with abstract concepts or hypothetical situations. Is deductive reasoning pendulum test, which makes the pendulum swing faster. The length of the string, the height from which the weight on the string is dropped, the amount of weight, the force of the initial push. That the adolescent participant's method of answering the questions identifies their level of operational thinking. Figure 9.10. Cognitive development in adolescence is influenced by an interplay of family and home environment, culture, and formal schooling contexts. So the family and home environment, the culture, and the schooling, and especially during adolescence, individuals take a lot of influence from their peer groups. And it seems like the peer group is being put more and more at a place of influencing the adolescent during this time comparatively to childhood and early childhood. Section 9.4, Decision-Making and Risky Behaviors in Adolescence. We'll describe the brain regions that govern adolescent risk perception and reward-seeking behaviors. Describe adolescents' decision-making in comparison to adults' decision-making, and describe the prevalence and types of common risky behaviors in adolescence. Figure 9.11. Teenagers are more drawn to exciting and rewarding activities. This can sometimes lead them to take risks, like riding in shopping carts just for the thrill of it. Figure 9.11. Teenagers are more drawn to exciting and rewarding activities. This can sometimes lead to them taking risks, like riding in shopping carts just for the thrill of it. The reason why we engage in risk-taking behaviors more in adolescence is likely due to the frontal lobe as well as the prefrontal cortex not being fully developed just yet. And the frontal lobe is not going to be fully developed for most people until about their mid-20s. And as previously discussed in prior chapters, the frontal lobe is crucial for decision-making, problem solving, as well as judgment. An adolescent from 12 to 18 is probably not going to make the most sound decisions or have the most thoughtful process comparatively to as they will as an adult. Because again, the area of the brain that's involved in decision making is not fully developed and won't be until about the 20s. This will conclude Chapter 9 of the Lifespan Development textbook provided by OpenStax. You can find a link to the free textbook in the description below. Thank you to OpenStax, and thank you for getting through the duration of this video. I hope to see you in the next one for Chapter 10. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.